Hello there, welcome along to UBC Good Morning Uganda Extra. It's yet another good morning from my side to you as well. I'm Joram Paul Sonko. This morning we have conversations that are going to be rotating around the refugee situation in Uganda, and you'll definitely feel it does look like a topic that we would definitely want to have an idea about and also hear from the perspective of the stakeholders as well. But that aside, you can definitely be part of our conversations online. As we speak about Uganda's refugee situation, you should as well be reminded that Uganda is actually having the largest number, or is the largest host of refugees in Africa. So that's something you have to look at and ideally say, if we are adding to the portfolio of Uganda being an hospitable country, then that is a hospitable country. This should definitely be something to look on. And then also looking deeper into our topic this morning is we are looking at consolidating and looking at the durable solutions for refugees in Uganda. And as we speak this morning, this can be a conversation where I'm talking to myself. I do have a guest in studio this morning, and this is the Norwegian Refugee Council Country Director, Laura Marshall. Very good morning, ma'am, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come and talk about this really important issue for Uganda. Thank you so much.
All right. And, well, the pleasure is ours having you this morning. Let's get into our conversation though. But before we even dive deeper, one would still want to understand, what does the Norwegian Refugee Council stand for? What does it represent in the country? What are the major objectives as we get deeper to understand?
So Norwegian Refugee Council is an international non-governmental organisation, and we are for the protection of refugees and people who have been forced to flee from conflict all around the world. So we have a long-standing engagement in Uganda. It's actually our second oldest programme. We've been here for 27 years. But originally we came to work with Ugandan internally displaced people, but as the situation in Uganda has got better for people in Uganda, the situation for people in the border has got worse, and now we're mainly concerned with working with refugees and the host communities, the Ugandan communities that support them.
Okay. All right. And speaking of the same as such, just a quick one as well, looking at the fact that refugees do have rights.
Yep.
Because as much as we look at them as people actually seeking for asylum and the like, yep, if you could ideally break down the idea that which kind of rights do they have and do they represent that we are supposed to be able to push as a country?
So that's an excellent question, because really what Uganda has done is amazing for refugees. So you led into this by talking about how Uganda is the largest host of refugees in Africa. It's the fourth largest in the world. So the recent figures this week are 1.58 million refugees in Uganda. So that's largely people from South Sudan, from Democratic Republic of Congo.
We have Somalia and then Burundi following up.
Yeah, exactly. But also now you have Ethiopia, Eritrea. You also have refugees from Rwanda. So what Uganda has done is actually very singular in saying that you have an open door policy that allows people to come in and seek protection from violence.
Okay.
And I've worked in refugee response all around the world for the last 20 years, and I can tell you that what Uganda has done is significant and important by allowing that open door policy to remain.
And well, a breakdown as well for the refugees or the destinations where, or the countries of origin of the refugees that we do have in the country. You get to realize that South Sudan is still having the bigger percentage of those, or the refugees coming in from South Sudan, followed by those from the Democratic Republic of Congo in relation to the kind of breakdown I do have. And also looking to, from South Sudan, we have DR Congo, we have Somalia, we have Burundi. She had as well mentioned Ethiopia, Eritrea, and quite a number of the neighboring countries in Africa that are having refugees that are coming to Uganda. But now, Laura, let's get into the refugee situation in Uganda. How is it like from your side?
So we can't really talk about there being one refugee situation in Uganda, where you have 1.5 million people. That's a lot of different people, a lot of different communities. So I would say you have refugees who are now living in settlements all around the country. Many people watching this show will be aware that there are refugee settlements close to them. But we also have large numbers of refugees in the urban environment. So for the refugees in the settlements, they receive a small amount of humanitarian assistance, land, to farm, and the idea is that hopefully they are moving to a situation where they're becoming more self-reliant. For the refugees in the urban areas, and this is majority Kampala and officially Kampala, we see that these are refugees who are understood to be self-sufficient, to not require so much assistance. But the reality is that refugees have additional needs. And we do need to be able to give additional assistance in the urban areas as well.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I mean, what we also see, which is very, very crucial, is that this is a little bit of a semantic distinction, but the refugees in the settlements, the refugees in the urban areas, this has majority been funded by humanitarian funds over the last 10, 15 years. And humanitarian funds are fundamentally short-term emergency funds. But what we have is what we call a protracted refugee situation in Uganda. That means these people have been here for a long time. We can't think short term about this.
Okay.
You know, we have to have a longer term plan, and that's something we need to be thinking about.
All right, and as you mentioned, refugees, earlier on you did mention of the human rights that they do have. Now, in relation to the human rights as well, what are some of the challenges that are attached to the refugees as they're settling into the country here? How are they being received by the neighboring communities? You know, I need to understand, how is the reception they're getting as they're coming in to settle within the country? It's never easy, trust me. How do they find it?
No, that's a very interesting question. So we ran some research this year talking to refugees and the host communities, majority around the settlements in West Nile, but also in the southwest, and some in Kampala. And what's really notable coming out of this research is for very many of the host community, they see a real benefit in having the refugees move in to the settlements around their community. And what they say is it increases the economy, it brings additional resources to the community, and that's extremely important. And I think it's amazing that Ugandans are talking about what refugees have brought to their communities. At the same time, refugees are coming from different countries. They are often fleeing situations of extreme conflict, and they've often experienced terrible conflict themselves. They've been the direct receptors of violence. So sometimes they have medical needs, psychological needs. When they get here, they need to be able to start to establish their lives. Perhaps they don't speak local languages. You know, there's lots of challenges there. And in the same way, when you and I have to set up bank accounts, phones, these things, this all requires identity documents. And so a lot of the time people don't have access to basic documentation because of their refugee status. And this is stopping them being able to become more self-reliant and taking the next step.
Okay, you did mention something to do with issues such as the access to education, healthcare, employment and protection from violence and discrimination. I love the element of discrimination in here. However much Ugandans are hospitable, I should recommend them for that. My other concern is in relation to discrimination, in relation to the fact that you're seeing new people coming in every other year, every other month. The question goes, are they discriminated? And how are they dealing with this? Have you found any cases of discrimination from these settlement areas, especially with the neighbors of the refugee settlements?
So we've found points of conflict more than discrimination.
Okay.
So points of conflict have really come up around things like people's access to land. And this has been quite crucial. So often when refugees are coming in, they're being given relatively small plots of land. These plots are not enough to sustain a normal family. So they're looking often to try and hire land from host communities. Some people in the host communities are extremely generous and give refugees land for no cost. Others are wanting a financial recompense for that, which is reasonable. But what we see is often that those relationships are very informal. Those agreements are very informal, and sometimes conflict arises around that access to land issue. And I'd say that issue is really crucial when we talk about social cohesion between the refugees and the host community. How clearly does everybody understand their land rights use? And
Yes.
you know, I think the host community should have something back when they're given access, when they're giving access to land to refugees,
Okay.
so that it's in everyone's best interests.
Okay. Of course, now the viewers will as well. I would want to drive my attention to the element of durable solutions for the refugees, because at times when you look at the element of durable solutions for refugee settlement in Uganda, the entire emphasis is how prepared are we as a country. But briefly, try to help us understand the concept of the durable solutions that are in place or that we are likely to employ for the refugee situation in Uganda.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, because, you know, for refugees in any situation, not just Uganda, we talk about what's the durable solution. When do they reach a point when they are no longer suffering from the ill effects of their displacement? So all of us have needs as individuals. It's really a question about when do the refugees reach the point where they are not, the displacement is not the defining feature. So here we talk about three things. We talk about return, we talk about resettlement to a third country, and we talk about local integration. Okay? So those are the three accepted big line durable solutions.
Okay.
There's also a fourth that I can talk about a little called complementary pathways. But when we talk to refugees, and through this research we did this year, we were talking to refugees, what did they want? And across the board, refugees wanted to be able to go home.
Okay.
And that's very interesting. Refugees wanted to be able to go home. However, we can only support them going home when we can say that that return is safe,
Okay.
that it is voluntary, that it is dignified.
Okay.
So the situation in the countries on the border does not currently give us that. We can't say to people who are in settlements from DRC, it's fine to go back to Eastern DRC right now. And they know that as well. So in the meantime, we have to look at what are our options for making the refugees self-reliant on the path to a durable solution.
Okay.
Okay.
And well, how hard is it convincing them to stay? Because like you've mentioned, you know, it's very, at times when you're settling into a new environment, you're definitely going to miss home and you want to go back home. And these are situations that happen. It's humanity here calling in. And I want to believe most of them are really defiant of the step. They don't really care whether it's still a war-torn country or a zone where they're supposed to be heading back home. But at times they feel they are no longer welcome where they are. How do you help out in such situations? How do you deal, besides this durable kind of solutions being put in place? How do you help them fit in society for the longevity of time? Because we've seen some others who are already comfortable within.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So this has to kind of go two ways, because what we want to do is we want to make the situation work for refugees while they're in Uganda. We want them to be able to contribute to Ugandan society, but also to be prepared for one day them to be able to go back to their home countries if that's what they want to do.
Okay.
So what we need to do is focus on when they are in Uganda, how can we help them and the community around them to step forwards into greater self-reliance. This is economic self-reliance in terms of taking their rights, but also think about what would happen if these people did go home to South Sudan tomorrow. What would happen if they went home to DRC? And there's parts of this that are maybe, they're obvious when you think about it, but we're not thinking about it enough. For example, if somebody now is born in Uganda to the family of refugees from South Sudan, they have a birth certificate from Uganda. That's good that they're registered in Uganda. Will they be able to access school in South Sudan if that family went home tomorrow? If you get your primary leaving certificate from Uganda
and you want to do secondary from South Sudan,
would you be able to go home? Would they say yes, that's fine, or would that be difficult? And that's where it really is on us to think a little bit more about how do we help people when they're here? how do we help people when they go home?
Okay.
If they go home.
Doing the follow-up.
Yeah, doing the follow-up and thinking about it in terms of, because the problem, and I speak as a humanitarian,
Yes.
the problem for us is we're very used to thinking about the short term,
Okay.
not what's the long term. And the refugees have been here for a long time, and they probably still will be here for a long time.
Yes, and they're still incoming in.
And they're still incoming.
And, well, you've actually touched a very sensitive part of the continuity of, for example, education purposes. You're done here and you want to go back.
Yeah.
How do you go? And you've also touched another critical issue that brings me to my other question of, after they're back, when you're looking at the extensive checkups you normally do, are they well off the other side again, or most of the times they just wanted to be back home?
So the situation in the refugee response in Uganda
Yes.
is that we have seen funding going down and down and refugee numbers going up and up.
Okay.
So when we talk about what is available for refugees in the settlements, this is now extremely low levels of humanitarian support. So that means that some people are now going back who would not choose to go back if they could stay and support their families.
Okay.
What the research we did showed, when we talked to people from South Sudan, in every focus group we did, somebody knew someone who had gone back to South Sudan and been killed or disappeared. So in every time we had that conversation in the community, somebody knew that. But people are taking the risk because they want to create futures for themselves and their families. And if they feel they can't do it here, they will take the risk and go back. Similarly, when we talk about the situation right now with refugees coming from DRC, we see people going back into active war zones because it's cocoa harvest season, and they want to go back and try and harvest their crops. I mean, people are taking huge risks.
Let's also look at decision making, especially decisions that are going to affect the refugees that are settled in the country, where we have donors coming up, different aid coming in from both non-government organizations and of course international, but how impactful is it to them? But also, are they involved in the decision-making process? That is from your side as the Norwegian Refugee Council, and then also from other stakeholders within the refugee situation in Uganda.
So yeah, that is really an excellent question. I think the short answer is they are involved. Are they involved enough?
Okay.
I think that's really...
That's why the bigger question is
that's
now.
a bigger question now. I mean, we have very good structures we have something called the Refugee Engagement Forums, which is places where refugees can talk to some of the international organizations and OPM and the structures so that they can understand, that messages can be passed, issues can be raised. But the nature of humanitarian response is it's often very quick, and that doesn't really allow for proper inclusion within decision making. What we want to do is we want to see more development work done with refugees and their host community to make sure that kind of collaborative approach where people find their own solutions is much more at the forefront. And we've got good experience of this. Okay. We have very interesting livelihoods work where we have refugee communities and Ugandan host communities working together on improving crop yields and these things. When you facilitate people to come together and find their own solutions together, they find very good answers usually.
Laura, do we have some examples of community-led initiatives that have actually helped these refugee settlements?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite projects one of the examples from within our work is a project we have funded by the Norwegian Embassy, where we work with school management committees. And this is, we choose schools that have high numbers of refugee children in them. These schools have welcomed refugee children in, but they face additional burdens, additional costs because of that. So we work with the school management committees, allowing them to identify what they need and basically facilitate grants to them to answer their own problems in the community. And we've seen that go from very education focused to really expanding into things like the schools identifying that school gardening would be important to make sure that nutrition improves, and then that they can expand this to the community to allow people to bring in their own crops for school feeding. So you create a whole ecosystem around a school that supports both the refugee community and the Ugandan children as well.
Okay. As the council now, the Norwegian Refugee Council, you've been here working, you did mention 27 years.
The organisation, yes,
the organisation,
not me.
the 27 years of the organisation. Now, I want to believe, as you move to these countries, there's supposed to be collaboration with the government.
Yeah.
If you can ideally break down for us the collaborations that you've definitely had with the government and other stakeholders in relation to upholding the refugee rights. How have the collaborations worked? What are those? And what are you looking forward to?
Yeah. Okay, so as I'm sure you know, the refugee response in Uganda is managed by the Office of the Prime Minister, largely in collaboration with UNHCR. So we work very, very closely with both of those organisations, and I think that OPM has provided amazing leadership on this issue.
Okay.
But the refugees are beyond the settlements as well. So we're also working with, for example, the Ministry of Education. In Kampala, we're working with KCCA to make sure that it's really a holistic approach. And I think that one of the defining features for me of working in Uganda is really that collaborative problem-solving approach that comes from government agencies. Every time we sit down to address a problem, I feel like everybody at the table is really trying to get to the same point, really trying to find solutions, and that's extremely notable.
And which areas do you think we need further collaborations to ensure that we uphold the rights of the refugees?
So that's an excellent question. We've already touched a little bit around this issue of housing, land and property rights. So with access to proper documentation to make sure that both refugees and the host community understand things like land use agreements, things like that will do a lot to make sure that there's social cohesion. There's a few other issues as well that we could be doing more. We could have more quick wins on. So I know that thankfully Uganda government is already considering the urban refugees. So at the moment you can only be registered as a refugee in Kampala.
Okay.
But the reality is that many people are going into other urban areas and working, looking for livelihoods opportunities, but they're not formally there. And that means that we can't plan for it, we can't deliver services, and that's putting a lot of stress on the services that already exist.
Okay.
So really what we hope in the new year is that we're going to see a change of policy to allow refugees to be urban refugees in other urban settlements.
Okay.
That's crucial. There's a few other things that would really help. One is, okay, let me start by saying that Uganda is amazing in what you have on paper in terms of refugee rights.
When you also look at the legal framework.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. But when you go into the lived experience of refugees, what's in the legal framework doesn't always translate into the reality. Okay? So, for example, Uganda has these amazing protections around the right to work. We want refugees to be able to work. We don't. I work in many countries where you go and refugees are sitting in camps. They don't have jobs. They don't have futures. Uganda doesn't do that, and that's,
some of them actually have an identification cards as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that basically prevent them from accessing rights. Uganda has taken the opposite, the kind of the opposite way round, which has given refugees and actually Uganda a huge possibility to capitalize on the talents of refugees. But in reality, if you want to work in a formal job as a refugee in Uganda, the bureaucratic process is extremely long. People don't know about it, people don't understand it, and so refugees who could take on really good jobs don't get a look in. Now, where that's particularly problematic is where we have big gaps. So for example, if you're a trained teacher from South Sudan, you can't come with your teacher training qualification
to Uganda,
have it recognised, and then go and teach in the school in the settlement.
So if you're a refugee?
If you're a refugee, you can't. So that means that people who are educated, people who have experience, people who can contribute to the economy are not brought into the economy quickly enough to really make a difference. And you know, there's lots of people, especially when you look at people arriving from Sudan now. You know, you have people coming in who've been running businesses, and they're going to face the same problems getting access to the documentation and the legal work. Because without that, with that, if we get that, then we can grow the Ugandan economy. Without it, we've got people sitting idle.
I love the fact that you're emphasizing the element of providing education and a livelihood kind of longevity program for the refugees. But how are we going to push for this really? By the look of things, it seems it's supposed to be a very huge collective effort from all of us.
Yes, it's a huge collective effort from all of us, and I think we've been doing a lot of work in the past weeks and months, really highlighting the situation in Uganda internationally, because what Uganda has achieved so far in the refugee response is enormous, but without additional support, we can't achieve what needs to be done now. We would very much like Uganda to be able to say in 10 years' time, look at the incredible success, but without now a lot of support coming in from the international community in terms of development money that's focused both on refugees and the host population, that's going to be really difficult. So we need that. We also need the intervention of the private sector, really developing the economies around the settlements. And we need, again, I think the Ugandan government has done exactly the right thing in terms of planning in the refugee response into its national plans, but we need now to activate those.
Okay, and matters of the vulnerable groups and of course gender sensitive communities is also something that is within the refugee settlement and needs clear breakdown in regards to the conversations we're having this morning. But when we do return after the break, that is where we will definitely kick-start off our conversation. I'm still with Laura Marshall, who is the country director of the Norwegian Refugee Council. Big conversations on the durable solutions for refugees in Uganda. How best can we deal with the situation with the fact that at least with the growth of the refugees in the country, the other issue of funding is also decreasing. How about that? We have more of the conversations coming up shortly after. Stick around to GMU Extra.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Junko.
Yo.
Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Uganda, haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a poultry project, and now things are moving.
Junko, I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
In this family, we can't agree on anything. Martha. We can't even agree on what to watch. All the games to play.
Martha.
Ndoza Mulabi, we can't even agree on what to eat. At least the one thing for now we can all agree on is the soap to use. He likes that it's long. Anti-economy. I like that it keeps my skin smooth. Ate alina echov. And the children like that. It smells amazing. Everyone is happy. Movit soap comes in 4 fantastic flavors. Movit family soap is truly soap for the whole family.
Movit. All day confidence.
UBC is the national public broadcaster. We educate, inform, entertain, and inspire our audiences. You can watch us on free-to-air channel 001. DSTV channel 282, GoTV channel 371, Star Times channel 201, Zuku TV channel 20, and Azam TV channel 350. Even when your subscription expires, you can still watch UBC for free on your pay TV platforms.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Well, and we'll be back from the break, and our conversations do continue here. I'm still with Laura Marshall. Laura Marshall is the country director for the Norwegian Refugee Council, and we are having conversations rotating around the durable solutions for refugee settlement in Uganda. How do we deal with the issue, with the refugee issue, if I'm to put it in that way? When you move around Uganda today, even in Kampala, you'll come to realize that you will ideally meet up with a refugee who is already now part of the entire Ugandan contingent. That clearly shows you how welcoming we have been and how accommodative we are. But there are lots of other issues surrounding the refugee settlements in Uganda, especially for the new refugees trying to settle in and trying to find home in here as well, going back to those who also no longer want to be part of the Ugandan atmosphere and want to go back home, because nonetheless, all the time, home will always be calling you at certain times as well. But before we did go in for a break, I did mention that we look at the gender best situation, and for example, the vulnerable groups. And speaking of the vulnerable groups here, I'm speaking of mothers, children, and then the persons with disabilities. You have to identify the fact that all of those are part of the refugees. But how is the situation under which they actually live within these refugee settlements is where we want to have our next part of the conversations. And of course, because it's very concerning and also very worrying. Speaking of this particular marginalized group of people, how do you deal with them? What is the situation while in these settlements?
So, I mean, I think I should probably start by saying that the vast majority of refugees in Uganda are actually women and children. So when we talk about, you know, who this group actually are, we're talking, I'm going to try and quote, but I might not be quite correct here, but I think it's around 70% of those people who have sought refuge in Uganda are women and children. So we're not talking about a minority here at all. You're actually talking
about the majority.
Yeah, you're actually talking about the vast majority. Now, a lot of those people are coming from conflict areas, and they've witnessed terrible violence. They've maybe lost everything that they have. So when they start here, they have immediate needs in terms of trying to restart a life, re-establish routines and those things, and just get access to the basics. And by the basics, I mean basic shelter, basic amounts of food, basic access to education and healthcare. And where we are right now in the settlements is that that's very, very challenged. There's extremely low levels of funding going into this, and so people are receiving very low levels of support.
Okay.
I will also say as well that, you know, when we talk about vulnerable groups, one of the ones that we often miss out in this is the elderly. So often we do have older people over 65 years old who've maybe lost family on the other side of the border, coming across, and now they are challenged to support themselves, farm for themselves, by themselves. And that's, I mean, that would be hard for any of us. So, and they're also a group that you wouldn't necessarily want to, you know, when we talk to elderly people, they're like, nobody wants to talk to us about livelihoods projects, because everybody assumes
you're in your retirement, and anytime now you're living.
Exactly, exactly. So this is, you know, so there's real challenges around that. There's also real challenges for children with disabilities and people with disabilities. There's very few livelihoods opportunities that really support people with disabilities properly, that see them as a key target group. But there's a very high number of people with disabilities who can be productive and who can contribute, who can support themselves, but they do just need additional considerations to be able to do this. When you go into schools in Uganda, and this is not just for refugee children, we are really challenged to properly see the inclusion of children with disabilities. I've been to some amazing schools that are doing it well. I was in a school in Arua a couple of months ago that has a fully integrated program, and they're looking now to expand to have specific classes for deaf children. And when we support them to do things like that, that's not just refugee communities who benefit, that's the Ugandan community as well. So I think really the messaging here has to be around thinking through who these people are who are coming, what they've experienced. And from our side, I think really thinking about how including those differences means we can include more people generally. It's not just these very specific groups.
Okay.
Yeah.
And looking deeper now, you did mention we always focus on the short term, or what you could say, focusing on only what is happening now, and tend to forget about the long term, what will happen tomorrow, what is happening next year, the other 5 years. Looking forward, what would be the recommendations that you would suggest that the Norwegian Refugee Council should suggest, or what is being done today to ensure that we have sustainable and durable solutions for the refugee issue in Uganda?
So, I mean, that's a very big question. So, I mean, as an organisation, we will continue to provide emergency humanitarian support to people who are new arrivals in Uganda. But I think the responsibility on us now as organisations and on the wider community is to really think a bit more long term about this. To think about whether or not these people are still going to be in Uganda in 10 years, in 20 years. If so, we need to have integrated programs with Ugandans that really bring up people's self-reliance, their economic ability to support themselves, rather than just this very, very short-term thinking. So at a kind of umbrella level, we really need to be planning for the long term. I've forgotten what the second part of your question was.
The part was looking at the long term.
Yeah.
What are the recommendations? One to the stakeholders, government, and maybe the other humanitarian groups out there in relation to sustaining the refugee issue in Uganda?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we talked a little bit as well as making sure that the refugees are part of national plans, and they are already part of national plans, but we need more institutional support to make sure that those plans can move forwards to advance for everybody, not just the refugees, for Ugandans as well, to make sure that there is more economic development, there's more access to better education, better healthcare. These are things that can benefit all of us when we come together. But within that, we have to now step a little bit away from our normal ways of doing things, because the world is changing. It's changing very, very fast. And in the past, the way that we've done humanitarian response has been very much like, oh, you've just crossed the border, here's a bucket and a tent, you know? And that's not the world we live in anymore. So we really need to think about this less in terms of refugees' immediate, we need to meet refugees' immediate needs, but refugees can be huge contributors to society and to the economy. They just needed a little bit of extra support to do that. So how do we start to open doors to make that possible for them to be full members of society, to really contribute?
Okay.
Yeah.
And Laura, you've mentioned of the fact that the world is changing. The world we're living in now is changing every other day. This brings me to the element of innovation and technology.
Yeah.
How do we help, the refugees tap into this space, which does seem like a projection for the future, as much as we are calling for them being inclusive in everything and trying to be part of the economy. Technology-wise, how are we having them into this bucket that still looks virgin in the African setting?
That's an interesting question, because I think that we're challenged a little bit. Sometimes I feel that we're trying to do things and we are not the right people to be making some of these decisions. It's not what we know best about. So one of the things we've really tried to do is look for partnerships with organizations like Microsoft, Google, and these things. And we've done things like create an online app. Basically, it means that if you're on your phone, you can register through us and you can go online at a zero-rated call and get access to lots of different training and information. It's something we call Changamuka. And so by doing that, we're really helping young people who, they're very creative. They have their own ideas about how to work, how to make money. but they need a little bit of extra help to get there. So rather than just do it as pure vocational training, giving people the access to more training online, bigger resources, that once you're online, it kind of opens up the world to you. So things like this, I think we've really appreciated the private sector coming in and giving us some support with this. I think the private sector needs to come much more into the refugee response as well.
The private sector.
I think that would be, we would like to see this much more as an economy of refugees rather than just a camp.
Okay, very true. And I did like the idea that you said we should not only be looking at just providing a bucket or mattress to the refugee while settling in. We need to create room for ideas, to generate ideas from these young people, or even those we look at as the vulnerable, who may as well contribute greatly to the economy. But of course, as we continue to have this kind of situation, I think on my side, I would say Ugandans as well should be quite more welcoming, I should say, in relation to once we have these refugees in here. The welcoming aspect is include them in the conversations, discussions of saying the societies grow as well. It's not easy to have them understand our cultures, but as long as they grow within us, they feel more comfortable to share and, of course, create ideas. And in the long run, we'll be creating room for the economy. I think that is the same way of at least having the private sector tapping into as well. But further forward, what would be, your advice to, let's say, the government, then other international donors, in relation to what we are having as the refugee issue? Earlier on, as we kicked off the conversation, you mentioned that we are having a rise in the refugees, but we are short of the funding.
Yeah. So when you look at this in the global sense, we've actually not got less humanitarian funding than we did 5 years ago. We've actually got more. But globally, we have a lot more refugees than we did 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And unfortunately, this is just going up and up. So the same, even an increased pot of money is being pulled very thin.
Okay.
So this is a little bit what I mean by the challenge. Quite often donors say to us, we need you to do more with less. And then you need to do more with even less. And there is a point at which you can't do things. So I think what we see as really important is that we keep humanitarian funding for core life-saving humanitarian issues, and that when we have longer-term stayers, protracted refugee crisis that we do in Uganda, we really look for more support from development banks, from donor community, the private sector, to start thinking about what does this look like in the long term. Because people don't want to be dependent. People don't want to be reliant on humanitarian aid. Nobody really wants that.
Okay. And how can individuals, support, the humanitarian cause?
Thank you, that's a really good question. So, there's an awful lot of extremely good organisations, national organisations, refugee organisations, working with big groups of people who are supporting on the ground. And I think that's fundamentally very practically supportive. But it's also about what you said. It's also about hospitality. It's also about people knowing that they are safe and that they are welcomed in the communities that they've come to live in. And that's what Uganda has unquestionably done best. And it's really, I'm amazed by working in Uganda.
Oh, wow. Like she says, and of course, when you look at it, nobody will say so many bad things about the country here in relation to the people around and the welcoming nature of the Ugandans. But as we're winding up with our conversation this morning, what would be your parting shots? And then also, what would be your words of encouragement to the refugees who are in the country today but still have hope of getting back home? Because that is also an element that can never be ruled out.
I hope they're right. So I guess when we're talking about this overall problem, You know, we get stuck talking about the refugees, but the refugees are here because of conflict. And so what we need to do as a bigger community is start to address some of the root causes of conflict. Because until there isn't conflict on our borders, then we'll still have refugees in Uganda. Refugees in Uganda are living in different situations. I hope that they still have hope that they can build their lives here, but also hope that one day that they will be able to go home again and continue to build their lives back home.
All right. Okay. Now, in just 5 days' time, the Human Rights Day will be universally commemorated. And when you look at that, as we speak human rights, then that means also we have to uphold the human rights of the refugees. And it's a collective effort of you, Laura, and then me as well, and the entire country. So we need to step up as a nation. As we are having these refugees settling within our country, we should as well be further more welcoming and try to help them fit into society and see how much they can contribute to our communities today. But not only that, the element of discrimination and segregation should not be something we should be preaching as a country. Now, our conversations this morning have been looking at the durable solutions for refugees in Uganda and what one could ideally look at as a turning point of a sort. We can definitely do this as a country. Any last word that you have, Laura?
I mean, I think from me, and I speak as an outsider, you know, I want to really highlight the enormous work that Uganda has taken on in welcoming refugees. I think it deserves huge congratulations for this. What I want to see happen now is I want us to think 10, 15 years ahead, and a bit like the way you imagine what people will say at your funeral, we want to say, what would we want people to say about the refugee response in Uganda? We want to talk about, in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, we want to talk about the success and how refugees in Uganda helped build Uganda and then went home and helped build their own countries, their home countries as well. And that's possible, but it requires holistic response and it requires real support from all of us, but also the wider international community as well. It takes real focus. So I am hopeful for that. So that would be, I would invite you to also be hopeful for that too.
Indeed, let's all move with the hope. Many thanks for joining us, Laura. And of course, Laura Marshall is the country director for the Norwegian Refugee Council. The conversations were around refugees. I'm Joram Paul Sonkan. Many thanks for being part of UBC Good Morning Uganda. From the time we kicked off at 6:30 a.m. and till this particular time, we will definitely do this same time tomorrow morning, as we'll be here to inspire you with information, news, and a little spice of entertainment as well as you kick off your day. But also, most importantly, do remember to be very, very cautious as you're moving by, especially during night hours. It is the festive season. We do have so many thugs as of now. And also for those who are driving on the roads as well, be cautious as you are driving, especially along highways. We do not want to record more death during this season of festivities, as we are as well welcoming the year 2024. But obviously, we shall be here to make sure that you are inspired as much. Have a good morning and a blessed day.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Junko.
Yo.
What? Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Uganda, haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Junko. I thought of your friend. But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief. and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.